Most people think cruising in 2026 is safer, smoother, and more relaxed than ever. But the truth is, cruising has changed, and not in ways passengers are being warned about. Cruise lines are quietly overselling ships. Your cruise card is tracking more than just your drinks. And your behavior on one cruise can now follow you onto the next one. And here's the scary part. None of this is on the booking page. What you don't know can get you bumped, flagged, restricted, or quietly treated very differently on board. In this video, I'm breaking down 15 things you absolutely need to know before you step on a cruise in 2026. Because once you're on board, it's already too late. Stay until the end because the last one explains how cruise lines decide which passengers get perks and which ones get watched. Let's get into it. Number 1. Cruises are now quietly oversold. Most people don't realize this yet, but cruises are starting to copy the airline playbook. In 2026, some cruise lines are selling more cabins than the ship can realistically handle, betting that enough people will cancel at the last minute to make the numbers work. Most of the time, that gamble pays off. But when it doesn't, someone loses their cabin. And no, it's not always the person who booked last. When a cruise is oversold, lines don't always use the word canceled. They use softer language, reaccommodated, adjusted, or offered an alternative sailing. That can mean a different ship, a different date, a downgrade, or being offered credit that sounds generous, until you realize you've already booked flights, hotels, and time off work. What makes this worse is that overselling doesn't always show up publicly. You won't see a warning. You won't get an alert when you book. And two people in the same cabin category can be treated very differently depending on when they book, how much they paid, and their loyalty status. This is why some cruisers in 2026 are showing up fully checked in and still being told there's a problem with their reservation. If you've ever thought that only happens with airlines, that's no longer true. Number 2, your cabin category no longer guarantees the cabin you think. Most cruisers believe that once they book a cabin category, the hard part is done. Balcony booked, ocean view locked in, problem solved. But in 2026, cabin categories have become far more flexible, and not in the passenger's favor. Two people can book the exact same category, pay completely different prices, and end up with very different experiences. Because balcony no longer means what most people picture. It can mean an obstructed view you weren't expecting, a balcony with a metal wall instead of glass, a cabin with a connecting door you didn't ask for, or a room placed directly under a loud venue, gym, or pool deck. And here's the key part. None of that technically violates the booking. Cruise lines now group a wide range of cabin layouts under the same category name. As long as it technically qualifies, they're covered. This is also why last-minute cabin changes are happening more often. If the ship needs to reshuffle rooms because of overselling, maintenance issues, or operational changes, category comes first. Not location, not noise, not layout. So if you've ever wondered why someone pays less and gets a better cabin than you, this is usually why. And once you're on board, fixing it is incredibly hard, because on paper, you already got what you paid for. Number 3, drink packages are being actively policed. Drink packages used to be simple. You paid up front. You relaxed. You didn't think about it. That's no longer how it works in 2026. Today, drink packages are one of the most monitored things on board. Every drink is logged. Every swipe is timestamped. And patterns matter more than totals. Ordering too fast, ordering for someone else, passing a drink across the table, even just being watched doing it. Staff are trained to flag behavior that looks like sharing, and once that happens, it goes into your onboard record. Here's the part most people don't expect. If a package is canceled mid-cruise, it's not just your package that can be removed. In many cases, everyone in the cabin loses it. No refund, no warning, no appeal, and it doesn't always happen in the moment. Some passengers only find out days later, when the card suddenly stops working. By then, the decision is already logged. This is why you'll hear crew quietly reminding guests not to share. Not because they're being picky, but because enforcement has become strict. In 2026, drink packages aren't about how much you drink anymore. They're about how closely you follow the rules. Before we keep going, if any of these have surprised you so far, this is exactly why this channel exists. Most cruise changes never get announced. They just quietly happen. So if you want to stay ahead of them, make sure you're subscribed, because the last few in this video are the ones cruise lines really don't want talked about. All right, let's keep going. Number 4, your cruise card is tracking more than you think. Most people see their cruise card as a room key, a payment method, and maybe a way to order drinks. In 2026, it's much more than that. Every swipe creates a record. What you bought, when you bought it, where you were on the ship, how often you visited certain areas, and how staff interactions played out. This isn't about spying, it's about patterns. Cruise lines analyze behavior to manage crowds, control costs, and reduce problems on board. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Complaints are logged, disputes are logged, repeated trips to guest services are logged, even how issues are resolved gets noted. If you've ever felt like staff already knew your situation before you explained it, that's usually why. And these records don't always reset when the cruise ends. Behavior profiles can follow your loyalty number, booking history, and onboard account, especially if you've been flagged for rule issues, refunds, or repeated conflicts. This is also why two passengers asking for the same thing can get very different answers. One gets flexibility, the other gets firm rules. Because in 2026, the cruise card isn't just a convenience. It's a quiet decision-making tool that shapes how you're treated on board. Number 5, things that used to be free are quietly moving behind paywalls. Most people don't notice this happening at first, because it's not one big announcement. It's not a policy email, and it's definitely not advertised. It's small things. Late night snacks that used to be included. Specialty desserts that suddenly cost extra. Room service items that quietly disappear from the free menu. Casual dining spots that now include select items for an additional charge. On paper, nothing has changed. There's still free food. There are still included options. But in reality, the list of what's actually included is getting shorter, one item at a time. This is how cruise lines increase onboard spending without triggering backlash. Most passengers only realize it halfway through the cruise when the bill starts to grow, and they can't quite figure out why. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Number 6, cruise shortages are still happening, just hidden better. Cruise lines will tell you staffing is back to normal. What they won't say is that many ships are operating leaner than they used to. You see it in the details. Cabins cleaned once a day instead of twice. Venues opening later or closing earlier. Longer waits for drinks and dining. Entire spaces quietly closed on certain days. It's rarely framed as a shortage. It's called operational efficiency, or guest flow management, or adjusted scheduling. But the effect is the same. Crew are covering more areas, working longer hours, and juggling more guests, which means service feels different, even if you can't immediately explain why. This is also why guest satisfaction can vary wildly from sailing to sailing on the same ship. Nothing is officially wrong, but everything feels slightly stretched. Before we move on, this is the point where most people stop thinking, "That's annoying," and start realizing how much control they actually give up once they're on board. Because from here on, these aren't small changes. They're things that can directly affect your trip in real time. Number 7, internet is faster in 2026, but far more restricted. Cruise internet has improved a lot. Pages load faster, messages send quicker, video calls sometimes even work, so passengers assume the problem is solved. It isn't. In 2026, cruise internet isn't just about speed, it's about control. What you can access depends heavily on your plan, the ship, and how much bandwidth the system thinks you're using. Uploading videos, backing up photos, live streaming, cloud storage, certain apps and platforms. These are often throttled, limited, or quietly blocked, even on higher tier packages. And here's what catches people off guard. Two passengers can both have premium internet and still get very different experiences depending on usage patterns. Heavy users may notice sudden slowdowns, uploads that fail repeatedly, connections that drop at the worst time. There's rarely an announcement. It just stops working the way it did yesterday. This is because internet management in 2026 is dynamic. The system adjusts in real time to protect the ship's network, not individual passengers. So if you're cruising expecting to work remotely, upload content, or stay fully connected, this can turn into a real problem very quickly. The internet is better than it used to be, but it's also far more controlled than most people realize. Up until now, everything we've talked about affects comfort, money, or convenience. Number 8 is different, because this is where a cruise can stop being expensive and start becoming dangerous for your wallet. Number 8, medical visits on board can cost thousands. Most people assume ship medical centers work like a normal clinic. They don't. Onboard medical care is private, out of network, and priced very differently than most people expect. A basic consultation can cost hundreds. Simple tests add more. Medication is charged separately, and serious issues can climb into the thousands very quickly. Here's the part that shocks first-time cruisers. You often have to pay up front. Insurance is something you argue about later, once you're home, with paperwork, and with no guarantee of reimbursement. Even travel insurance doesn't always cover everything. Certain conditions, pre-existing issues, ship-based treatment limits, all of it matters. This is why crew are trained to recommend the medical center early. Not because it's cheap, but because waiting can make things worse. And if a medical issue leads to evacuation or hospitalization at a port, costs escalate fast. In 2026, onboard medical care isn't a minor expense. It's a financial risk that most passengers don't fully understand until they're already in it. Number 9, you can be denied disembarkation at a port without warning. Most cruisers assume that if the ship docks, everyone gets off. In 2026, that's not always true. Port authorities, not the cruise line, make the final call on who can disembark. And those decisions can happen quickly, quietly, and without much explanation. It can be something simple, a passport detail that doesn't meet local requirements, a travel history flag from a previous trip, a health marker that raises concern, even a name that triggers additional screening. What makes this unsettling is how it plays out. The ship docks, passengers line up to go ashore, and some people are told to step aside. No argument, no negotiation, no, we'll fix it later. If local authorities say no, that's it. You stay on board while everyone else explores the port. And here's the part most people don't expect. This doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means the rules changed or were applied differently for that destination. The cruise line can't override it. And refunds are rare because technically, the ship still delivered you to the port. In 2026, disembarkation isn't automatic. It's conditional, and sometimes out of your control. Before we move on, the next few are where things shift from inconvenient to uncomfortable. Because from here on, we're talking about what cruise lines can quietly decide about you and how much control you actually have once you step off the ship. Number 10 is where most people realize cruising in 2026 is nothing like it used to be. Number 10, private islands aren't private anymore. Private islands used to be the calm part of the cruise. Fewer people, open space, a break from the ship. In 2026, that image doesn't always match reality. Many private islands are now handling multiple ships at once, sometimes thousands of passengers arriving within the same few hours. That means crowd control, timed access, designated zones. Certain beaches or cabanas restricted unless you pay extra. What used to feel like a relaxed beach day can now feel more like a managed event. And it's not just crowds. Food lines are longer. Shade fills up fast. Staff are stretched thin. Some cruise lines now stagger shore access times or limit how long guests can stay in certain areas, especially on the most popular islands. So while the island is still private on paper, the experience is more structured than people expect. For first-time cruisers, this can be disappointing. For repeat cruisers, it's a noticeable change. The island hasn't changed. The number of people using it has. Number 11, specialty dining fills up earlier than it looks. Most passengers assume specialty restaurants are flexible. You board the ship, you settle in, you book dinner later. In 2026, that approach often fails. Specialty dining capacity is tighter than it appears, tables are limited, staffing is leaner, and reservations are being pre-filled before the ship even sails. By the time some passengers board, prime dining times are already gone. What makes this frustrating is how misleading it feels. Restaurants look open, menus are displayed, staff are standing at the entrance, but behind the scenes, large blocks of availability are already reserved for loyalty tiers, dining packages, or pre-booked guests. This is why people line up at guest services the moment they board. Not because they're overreacting, but because they know waiting even a few hours can cost them every reservation they wanted. In 2026, specialty dining isn't about what you're willing to pay. It's about how early you act. Number 12, cabin noise complaints are exploding. Most cruisers expect noise near the pool deck or late-night venues. What they don't expect is to hear it inside their cabin. In 2026, cabin noise complaints are one of the fastest growing issues reported after cruises. And it's not just partying neighbors. Newer ship designs pack more venues into tighter spaces. Multi-use areas sit above, below, and beside cabins. Gyms, theaters, lounges, and service corridors now overlap living spaces more than ever. That means early morning equipment noise, late night bass vibrations, staff carts rolling overhead, doors slamming at all hours. What makes this worse is how hard it is to fix once you're on board. Moving cabins depends on availability. Soundproofing solutions are limited, and compensation is rare unless the issue is extreme. This is why some passengers sleep better in older ships than brand new ones. The ship looks modern. The cabin looks beautiful, but the noise never stops. And in 2026, choosing the wrong cabin location can quietly ruin an otherwise great cruise. Before we get to the final three, this is where the shift really happens. Up until now, these changes affect everyone. The last three decide who gets perks, who gets flexibility, and who quietly stops being treated like a good passenger. And most people don't realize this is happening until it's already affected them. Number 13, loyalty perks are quietly shrinking. Cruise loyalty programs still look the same on paper. Same tier names, same point system, same glossy promises. But in 2026, what you actually get at each level is changing. Priority boarding that isn't really priority anymore. Lounge access that's restricted by time or capacity. Free perks replaced with discounts instead of inclusions. None of this is announced loudly. Benefits aren't removed. They're adjusted, reworded, or quietly limited. So longtime cruisers start noticing something feels off. They're still loyal, still booking, still earning points, but the experience feels thinner than it used to. The program didn't disappear, it just stopped meaning as much. Number 14, ships now track crowd flow and restrict access in real time. By 2026, ships don't just react to crowds, they predict them. Cruise lines monitor where passengers gather, how long they stay, and how movement affects safety and spending. When an area becomes too popular, access can be quietly limited. Entrances paused, staff redirecting traffic, events capped or timed, spaces suddenly labeled at capacity. To passengers, it feels random. To the system, it's calculated. This is why a venue you visited freely yesterday might feel controlled today. It's not personal, but it is deliberate. And it's another reminder that once you're on board, the ship decides how you move through it. Number 15. You're being profiled as a passenger, and it follows you. This is the one most people don't want to believe. Cruise lines don't just track individual moments. They build profiles, spending habits, complaint history, rule issues, refund requests, behavior patterns. All of it feeds into how you're classified internally. Some passengers are seen as easy, some as valuable, some as costly, and that classification doesn't always reset when the cruise ends. It can affect upgrades, flexibility, how issues are handled, even how closely you're watched. This is why two people asking the same question can get completely different outcomes. In 2026, cruising isn't just about where you go, it's about how the system sees you, and most passengers never realize they're being judged until something goes wrong. Cruising in 2026 isn't worse than it used to be, it's just different. Ships are bigger, systems are smarter, and decisions are being made quietly in the background, long before passengers notice. Overselling doesn't come with a warning, tracking doesn't come with an announcement, and profiling doesn't come with an explanation. Most people will still have a great cruise, but now you know why some passengers get bumped, why some get watched, and why the same rules don't always apply to everyone. Cruise lines don't need to hide these changes, they just rely on passengers not looking too closely. And that's what this channel is here for. If this video helped you see cruising a little differently, let me know in the comments. And if you're cruising in 2026, go prepared, because the most important cruise secrets aren't about what's included. They're about what's quietly changed.